Here we go. From Cowork 591 Studios in beautiful downtown Jesup, Iowa, this is the birthplace of the Bohemian Resistance. We are the Bohemian Underground with producer Blake Tempus and co-host Dale Rueber. I'm Jim Gillespie, and this is the news for September 15th, 2025. We're sponsored by Mickey D's Pizza and Lobster. The Frills are kind sponsors of this podcast. Include them at your wedding, graduation, or festival plans. Don't wait, their schedule's filling up already for 2026.
Is it really?
It is.
Wow.
They are sponsoring a traveling arts show for the Steve Brown Arts Center. Thanks to them for including the traveling arts show. Another sponsor who's been with us since the birth of the SBAC is Derek's Repair, located in Jesup, Iowa. Contact Derek Marty for your car repair needs. Also, check out the podcast, What Is Up, with our friend Bubba Seaman up in Fairbank, Iowa. I hate to say Wapsie Valley.
Yeah.
It's in Fairbank. Tonight, we're fortunate we have a man with multiple hats, although he's lost a few of those hats along with a few of those hairs.
That's right. That's probably the problem.
Yeah. Nate Clayberg is with us. Thank you, Nathan, for joining us.
Well, I know this has been a long time coming. You've teased me for years about I should be on, and then I finally cornered you, I think, in a moment of weakness, and you invited me in.
It is. Thank you so much. You're involved in broadcasting. Let's go.
Let's start there.
Ways.
Yeah. Okay.
You did a UNI game. Let's start. You did a UNI game. Is that right?
I've done a few of them over the years. I started doing this when I was 16 years old in Webster City, Iowa, on KQWC radio, and there was a guy there by the name of Andy Anderson that he kind of showed me the ropes on how to call basketball games and baseball games, and got into wrestling a little bit. And what did I know about wrestling? But I saw a lot of it and learned along the way, and did local radio in Ames and Boone, Iowa, and was in Richmond, Virginia for a spell, working for a big station, and then started doing Virginia Commonwealth University women's basketball. I was doing that for a season, and then we moved back here, and I wasn't on the air for a while when I was at the University of Northern Iowa and working in the athletic department. I do some PA work for fun, but I go back, it's probably been 10 years when Heartland Technology and Anthony Baugh was just beginning to film football games on the Cube is what we called it then. Mm-hmm. And I said to Anthony, I go, you want to ever have an announcer on there? And he goes, well, what would that take? And I kind of threw some equipment at him of what he needs, and they bought it, and we started doing it. I hadn't probably called a game in a long time from there. Right. And we got right up there, and I remember, I think it was Zach Knutson goes, "You really do know what you're doing."
Yeah.
And I pulled Luke Baldwin in there to be my color guy, and the rest kind of took off from there. But along the way, I got to do. I subbed for Gary Reimel one time for a UNI game at Old Dominion in Norfolk over Thanksgiving break when he had to do football, and I've done some ESPN3 stuff for UNI softball and women's volleyball or women's basketball, and state championships on the high school sports network. I've done that for a few years between baseball and soccer. And what do I know about soccer? I absolutely didn't know anything about soccer other than the clock keeps moving, and you got to get in the goal. So I learned along the way. I did watch some Soccer for Dummy videos just to try and make sure I knew what the rules were. But, and then I hung up the headset this year for the Jayhawk Sports Network after 10 years since my kids graduated. But had some fun times along the way.
What is your most memorable moment?
As a whole, or looking at Jesup?
As a whole.
As a whole. I can think back to I was able to be a part of it broadcasting a good friend of mine in high school who was a wrestling championship final match back in 1993 is probably when that was, or getting a chance to travel up and down the East Coast when I was at Virginia Commonwealth to go into UNC Wilmington or Hofstra or up to Towson or some of those schools that I didn't know much about being a Midwest kid.
Would VCU fly?
Oh, no.
No,
it's a lot of times the work I was doing there, I had just got through grad school there, and I would jump in a car of my own Sunday morning and head off to Baltimore to see Towson, or head down to UNC Wilmington, or wherever else we had to go. George Mason was in there, Old Dominion, William and Mary, some of those schools in there. You'd meet them up there, and I did travel with them up, I guess, to Hofstra. Hofstra in Delaware. No, what was it? Hofstra and I got to think about this. Drexel in Philadelphia. And then that just happened to be the weekend they got like 8 feet of snow and shut down the town and stuck around there for a couple days. So, but getting that experience was pretty cool to be a part of. But being able to go to Old Dominion and cover UNI for men's basketball. But, it's always fun to be a part of what's happening right here in Jesup, I guess.
What's your most memorable Jesup moment you call?
There's a few of them over the years. I remember this was one of the early years where it was a hazy, foggy Friday night where we beat Dyke New Hartford in a game that probably was in doubt, but our boys stuck up. I think it was Ethan Wyatt was on there, and Schmidt was on there, and I'm trying to think of who else was all on that team back in, would that have been 20? I can't even think of what year that would even been.
A couple of linemen, because we talked about that day about being more violent. Richter Boy was on there.
He would have been on there.
And a Winters Boy was on that team.
Yeah.
They had really attacked the weight room. And
we were beginning, you were almost at the point where you couldn't see the field from the press box and things like that. But there were some of those football games where you'd get a rain delay and lightning would keep coming, and you just kind of hanging out. And one time I just kind of walked around at interviews, and they were playing any rain song you could think of on the public address system, just to keep people engaged. And I think we walked out of there after midnight, one night because they couldn't get. They were like, we could do it Saturday, but they can't find officials, so let's just stick it out, through there. But there's some pretty good players we saw, come through with, Jack Miller. The time he had, as a starting freshman basketball player, and the dunks he had in there, and Carson Lenow, and then you look at here in the last, couple. I think we had a few state tournament trips from the girls that I was able to cover, and for the boys as well. Yeah. But I think I had a lot of fun when we did, what did I call it? Jayhawks on the Move. Yeah. And it was when Tim Sauer started coaching football a few years back, and I was like, we should do something different. Right. So I said, just get in my truck and we'll go drive around Jesup and we'll talk football. Whether that was legal or not, I don't know. We just, asked for forgiveness. But Tim was good with that. I took Nick Green on a golf cart out of the country club one time, and I said, tour me through what this course is like. And we went through there. That was a chilly morning. Going through that. But, Carter Even. A couple of years back, he was saved a ball from going out towards the sidelines and threw it over his head and went in the basket, and we went nuts. But I think there was also, a 3 or 4, 5 overtime game against Union a few years back too. So I don't know. There's a lot of cool moments in there, and it got better as kids that were more my kids' age were coming up through, and I knew who they were. So that was fun to be a part of.
I have the 5 greatest calls of all time, not necessarily yours. Okay. Here are the 5 greatest calls of all time. Number. This is outside the list. I believe it was Joe Starkey calling the Cal Stanford game. The band is on the field.
All right.
The band is on the field.
Is this in no particular order, or is this fine? Okay.
That was just outside the list.
Okay.
Here is number 5 now. It would be, I'm having a block. Al Michaels, I believe, calling Olympic hockey. Do you believe in miracles?
Sure.
Yeah.
It was a big game.
Yeah, that's number 5. Number 4, and I can still remember this, and I was young. My father grew. I always tell everybody my mother's father was a horse thief, and my mother's father was a horse trader, and my father loved the Kentucky Derby and that. And when Secretariat was running, he was running at Belmont, and it was Chick Anderson. And he cried out, he's moving like a tremendous machine. The Kentucky Derby was Secretariat. Okay. That's number 3. Number 2, who said, "Whoa, Nelly"?
Oh.
You remember that?
Keith Jackson.
Keith
Jackson. Right in there.
Very good. Yep. And number 1, my favorite of all time, and I was just a kid on Monday Night Football.
Russ Hodges is the other one.
Russ Hodges was the other one. Very good.
Giants.
Very good. Down goes Frazier. Howard Cosell. I loved Howard. You learned a lot about Howard later on. His history came out and his relationship with Muhammad Ali or Cassius Clay. They were pretty close anyhow. And at the time, it didn't seem like it.
Well, two I would have stuck in there was the first Ali. Who did he beat for the championship?
Sonny Liston.
Sonny Liston, the first, it was Cassius Clay, then Clay Liston fight. Clay was not supposed to win.
Right.
And that was very exciting. And then when Hank Aaron hit his 60th home run, that was a good game.
Who called that? Was that Al Michael?
It might have been. I don't know.
But was
the
that
thing
Vince
I remember,
Scully?
and you're a sportscaster, is they were interviewing Kurt Gowdy, and he said, "What advice do you give to young guys getting into the business?"
Sure.
He said, "Give the score, give the score, give the score, give the score," because people want to know what they're tuning in. They want to know what the score is. And that's the main thing he told them. And so when I listen to, especially to radio games, I keep saying, "Give the score." When you tune in a little late, and a lot of them don't do it nearly as often as they need to.
The owner of the radio station I worked at growing up in Webster City he was always tell the score. And when I started doing Jesup stuff, that was the first time I kind of had done a video broadcast. And I was more radio. And what I realized was, you can see if the ball gets caught. You can see if it goes through the hoop. You can see but you can't necessarily tell who it is on a grainy YouTube stream or can't see a number very well. Even in here in the last few years, I started noticing how I watch games. And maybe you guys are the same. You're kind of doing other stuff while games are on. And how do you start drawing people's attention if something's going on that they might hear, that they break back to the living room to pull up the screen and see what they're missing or what it is. Or if they can hear the score, they're not necessarily watching how much time is left or down in distance or things like that.
Do broadcasters, before the game, do they sit and try to memorize numbers and names so they don't have to keep looking at that program? Because a lot of times they just, your home team you would know, but a lot of times the visiting team, professional, do you take a chance or take a time to do that before the game and try to? Or?
Some I've come across and some I've watched. There are some that are really good at it. That especially if that's what your full-time job is, and that's what you can rattle off numbers and things like that. Even as the season goes on in Jesup, I'm not necessarily looking at numbers. I'm looking at faces. As things go along, even opposing teams, you've maybe seen them before in the last year, or you start recognizing them. And I just have different things. I guess I reference. It could be their hair color that I'm referencing through what their name is or that they've been in there. But I know there's a lot of game prep that a lot of those key guys get into. When you look at, I don't know if you've ever seen the thing about Kirk Herbstreit, the last year or whatever, that he's on game day, but he would do a Thursday night. What do you do? A Thursday night pro game, I think, and then Friday night he would go watch. He would go watch his son play, and he was flying over these places. And then he'd have a Saturday game day, and then he'd have a Saturday game, and then he might end up somewhere else. But he was always just and granted, he probably had a team of people that had stuff organized for him.
Oh, I'm sure.
For what that was. What I guess I can pull back the curtain a little bit when I started doing college stuff, and I was aware of it when I worked in it, but they give you a packet of game notes. You will never use all of it. And that's when I started doing UNI women's games and softball. It was like you weren't necessarily calling information, but you were managing information of what was there and what you're communicating back to whoever had the shot or who made the play. You get a game that's out of hand and you got to start filling stuff. So you can start going to the game notes. High school's a little bit different. You start getting some rough games that we've had, over the years, and you're like, you just start having a conversation. Hopefully somebody's in the booth you can start talking to. But you can only reference old stats and things like that so much. But the college game's a little bit different. And I learned too, there's if you ever pull up watching a college game, you can pull up the stats on their website, the live stats. And if you watch up there, I always wondered, how can you tell, like, UNI's on an 8-0 run? It shows up in that stat monitor.
Really?
So those guys are pulling that stuff off that they see get pointed out to them by a producer or on that monitor. So you're only as good as the sports information guy across the way who's putting the data in to make sure it's good.
I'll always remember it was Brent Musburger, and he was doing NCAA tournament, and the game was over, and he's recapping, and he says, "And waiting in the wings, the team everyone is scared of." George, I thought, oh man, that's a real bad mistake.
I used to, when I was head coach years ago, we had a couple of good tournament runs, and Independence Radio would do our games, and I used to give them our scouting, for, and that, I hope that helped them. It was a way, he could see, or they could see what we were trying to do or what they were trying to do. And
when I guess going back, Dale, it's when I would do UNI games and you have information to learn from, or when I do state championship games, get a chance to interview the coach and talking through that stuff, and you can get on Varsity Bound now and pull up some decent amount of stats. I actually started using ChatGPT now here this year to help me put game notes together. Okay. So using the transcript from the coach interview and uploading stats and rosters and things like that, and asking it to point out keys to the game and key information I should be aware of. And
right.
Sometimes it's accurate, and sometimes you gotta double check it. Yeah. But you got to spend time on it. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily want to look bad, at least on that stage. Jesup, I guess Luke and I had more fun, I think, than we probably should have had when we were. We got it through.
People enjoy that if the announcers are having fun, I think, and it seemed like they like the sport and they like the kids. And
Jim, I didn't hear your best calls on your sheet. It wasn't the night that Luke and I started to play Bamboozled. No. Where we would roll the dice on what kind of flavored jelly bean we were going to eat. Yeah. Was it earwax, or was it buttered popcorn, or was it skunk, or was it licorice? We only did that once.
Okay.
We decided we probably weren't going to do that again.
That probably was a good idea. So who are your top 5 announcers of all time? Do you have
5 announcers of all time? Yeah. I'm going to go back to Pete Taylor.
Okay.
Iowa State, we're going to go back. I'm an Iowa State guy. Yep. So I grew up listening to Pete Taylor. Right. You throw Jack Buck, Joe Buck, maybe in the same line. Yeah. Cardinals callers. Bob Costas is a good one. I always liked Mel Allen. I always just liked the way he talked, the way he did things there. 5th one in there. I have to think about that a little bit, but I don't know. I'm going to give a nod to Bob Uecker, I guess, since I was Major League fan, and he just kept at it.
I don't have him on my list, and I regret that now.
I used to get a kick out of Harry Carey.
Oh, yeah.
Because it looked like he had no idea what was going on. And Ron Santo, what do you think about that, Ron? Yeah, that was a good pitch. And that was all he would say. Said, why are they paying him? He was not giving any insight into anything. He struck out on a curveball, and that was just nothing. So
radio station I worked at in Boone, we were a Cubs affiliate, so I'd hear a lot of Harry Carey, and a lot of times you'd think you were winning, and ball's hit high, there it goes, and it's caught.
I heard a comedian doing Harry Carey doing a basketball game. So this is why Harry Carey didn't do basketball. Well, there's the tip, and he's running down. That's Joe. Okay, and that's the half. The score is,
Got a fax in from Dale from Jesup.
He
says his mom's listening.
Keep up with the game, It's just, he tells stories and everything.
So here we go.
You got your top 5?
I've got top 5, and I got outside the list. Here's 7 people outside the list. 8 people. Nate Clayberg.
Oh, wow.
Is outside the list.
Is he go?
This is just outside the list.
All right.
Do I need to Venmo you some money, or?
I'll give you my phone number when we're done. 7 outside the list. Bob Costas.
Okay.
He got a little too wordy for me. I liked him when he was doing the ABA stuff. Mm-hmm. When nobody was in the gym, he got pretty good. He was young. Joe Starkey. Al Michaels, Chick Anderson, Russ Hodges, Mel Allen, Keith Jackson.
Keith Jackson was very good.
He was very good. And just outside the list, again, horse racing, Haywood Hale Bruin. Do you guys remember Haywood Hale Bruin?
I do.
He was more or less a color man. He wasn't the announcer.
Yeah.
Number 5.
Oh, you already named off 5. Do you have
those were outside the list.
Okay. So you actually did 10.
Yeah. 11. 12 with you. This is number 5, John Madden.
Okay.
Okay. Number 4, Joe Buck. Number 3, Howard Cosell. Number 2, Harry Carey, when he was sober. And number 1, nobody's mentioned him yet tonight.
Yeah.
Vin Scully, yeah.
Yeah.
Pat
Incredible.
Summerall's not on that list?
Pat Summerall on this
Okay.
list,
He should be in
too.
there.
Kevin Harlan's a newer one.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
That he's pretty good.
Howard Cosell, I never could go with. I always felt he pretends like he knows the game. I don't think Howard Cosell ever played baseball or basketball or any sport, as far as I know.
He was a lawyer.
I know. Yeah. That's it's another strike against him too. We didn't get into the local things, but when Ron Gonder and Jim Zabel and who was the other guy?
Frosty Mitchell.
Frosty Mitchell were all doing Hawkeye games.
Yeah.
They all had their own station and everything. I just loved that.
Yeah.
And then they combined them down and just had the one job. But I used to enjoy Zabel.
Yeah.
If you were in Des Moines, he would be doing Beat the Bear on Sunday mornings and a bowling show, and anybody needed an announcer, he'd be there to do it. And then he'd do the Hawkeye games on the weekends and basketball during the week. But he was quite a guy.
They hated him. And
Oh yeah.
Well, you got to give
Well,
credit.
he was the biggest homer
yeah.
of them all.
But you got to appreciate that, the energy, and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
Gary,
yeah.
Gary Rima was right in that boat too. That
Yeah.
he was bleeding purple.
Yeah.
My brother
for what
played
he
ball
could do,
with
and the
Gary.
energy he had all
Yeah.
the time.
My brother played baseball. Gary Rima had a wooden bat team in Strawberry Point.
Sure.
And my brother was 25 years too old, but he was on the team. And so I got to meet Gary Rima over in Old several times, because he's an Old kid. And he was very energetic and everything. I used to listen to his sports show on 1540
Yep.
when he had that.
Yep.
And so, he was, and his kids were good ball players. I
Yeah.
think he loved baseball more than anything, as far as I know.
I think so.
But some of those games he called when you and I had those basketball wins, and who's the guy when Newby took that long? Oh, Newby. Oh, and that was that was the national guy. Yeah, that was
Ali Farouk Manish.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
hit that shot, and so he would get excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, he's good. Got to give a nod to Gary Dolphin too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But he just kind of keeps it even as it goes.
yeah,
He
yeah,
does.
A little more energy.
yeah. And you can, when the things aren't going well, you can just hear them shaking their head up there. You can't see them, but you can just, they're going, "Oh man, why does it have to be so hard?"
Yeah,
But,
yeah. Those are the tough ones.
Ron Santo used to say all the time, the Cubs, they'd be ahead in the ninth inning, the bases are loaded, they could. He said, "Why is it always so hard?"
This is the Steve Brown Arts Center Podcast Network, and we're with Nathan Clayberg. First part, we talked about his announcing days. We haven't talked about your part in education.
Sure.
So
couple
let's
different arms in there.
Yeah. So you're on the school board right now.
Yep.
How many years have you been on the school board?
I think total of 10. I did a term, started in 2011. Did a 4-year term, took a term off, came back. I came back, and why not come back? Well, I got to think about that. That would have been 11 in there. Why not come back? No, I think it was this term. I got to think through how it was, but I came back, and then COVID happened. So talk about a change of what you think your school year is going to be like, and your term. But we got through that, and some good things happened, and we evolved from that to being a part of some facilities projects, and we hired some good teachers, and it's completely different from when you guys were roaming the halls up at Jesup, and you got 3-year-old preschool in one end, and all the way you get the 18-year-olds in the high school at the other end.
Yeah.
But it's pretty unique to have it connected there.
Yeah. Can you explain how we had a bond issue in the early 2000s to get started, and
Sure.
then there's not been a bond issue since then, and we've been doing all that. Where is that money coming from since we didn't have to bond?
There have been some bond issues. And I could be corrected on that, but I know we've had to go. Well,
I thought there was
let me
only
hold on
once
on
they
that.
went to the voters.
Let me hold back on that, because that bond vote did come in, I think, for the expansion that resulted in the new middle school, high school gym, and the elementary building, which was finished in 2005. So I'm guessing that's what
that's
that
the
one
bond
was.
issue.
Yeah.
Because
Otherwise, I think we've always we've got to pass every few years that we're allowed to take that property tax dollars and the silo dollars and where we can spend them and that type of thing. And that's resulted in the funding that we've come up to, not necessarily bonding vote for the bond, but it's having its approval that we've been fiscally responsible, and we can use the taxes we have for building projects, things like that. And that's just, I'll give some credit to, previous administration and current administration with Cohagen, that you start managing what this all is. I can think back to, it would have been 2017 maybe, when we started talking about a facilities master plan. And otherwise, I think it was, well, what do we need this year, or what are we thinking about?
Yeah.
But let's actually look through of, we're going to eventually need an auditorium. That just finished, but I remember thinking, it was probably 10 years ago, thinking, will we ever need an auditorium? and where is that thing going to go? Yeah. The growth that we had through elementary, when those buildings were built in 2005, I know my daughter, when she was in 4th grade, they couldn't fit all those kids in that building, so they were up on the 3rd floor of the 5155 building.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, we got to do something. So that's when the Early Childhood Center came in, all the way down at the west end, and that's what preschool and preschool, kindergarten, pre-K, all down in there. So that kind of helped relieve some of that. And then, just keep kind of building buildings and going through, and then you look at what we have now with, not necessarily talking about, a new track in there along the ways and updates to the football field and things like that. But, the new building that just got finished with the auditorium, 505 seats, I think is what it is, or something like that. Yeah. It's at a point that if it was more than that, then it would have changed the fire code of how things needed to be as far as fire suppression, things like that. But, the biggest thing that I'm excited about, I think, are those areas that don't always get the attention when you're looking at the arts rooms that are being, well, when they moved music and band out of that 2nd floor in the old building and put them in the new auditorium area, that gave opportunity to improve those art spaces. And I know that's close to you guys, is how do we stoke that up a little bit, and if you've toured that or not, it's like, well needed space. And I had to I was saying the other day, I'm like, I walk up there and I kind of forget that it was the band space, and that band space was in well need of replacement, right?
For years.
And then you walk, that's such an odd space in the school. If anybody's toured through there, of kind of a maze of where you need to get to, let alone you need to try and use the elevator to try and get to a 2nd or 3rd floor. And
even the elevator buttons are hard to figure out. So. So all that was done with that penny tax, pretty much, the pebble tax.
Yep, through the penny tax.
That's because I was on that facilities committee when we were talking about what we needed back in the teens. And they had, I think, Brock Sapers really put a couple $1 million into the baseball diamond. I said, oh, man, I said, we can't be doing that. I said, for $2 million, you're just going to refurbish it and everything. And so I said, that needs to go at the bottom because you need all this other stuff first. But I see, it's out there now. They got it all worked out.
Yeah,
and they're getting it done.
All private dollars raised. And
so all those other things ahead of that on the list, apparently have been addressed. And now they're doing the ball diamonds, which I think is wonderful. But I'm just amazed at how we've been able to pay for all that.
Yeah, it's not through raising any property tax through a bond.
Yeah, see, it's just amazing to me.
There's debt on it that we hold, but it wasn't necessarily a voter-approved bond that had to be in there. But that's the cornerstone of Jesup, and I think probably you could say a majority of reason why people want to be here or stay here is because the school's here, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's been very interesting to me, I think especially the last few years, as I had a daughter graduate in 2021, I had a son graduate here in 25. It's seeing these new families in town. I'll walk out of a basketball game after calling that or walking around. I'm like, I don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. Because you have some new people coming to town that aren't just that never left Jesup. I think coming in.
What really saved Jesup, the school, and you back in history, is there was a time when the school board had a chance to take all that land from 6th Street down to 1st Street, and they spent the money and did it. And so the property has always been there. And so years and years later, you didn't have to buy any land. I mean, the land was already there, paid for with 1930s dollars or whenever. Yep. And so I always thought that's probably the wisest decision any school board ever made, was to buy all that land there when it became available. So.
Right. And we I don't know if anybody has noticed, but it was an old motel that sat just across the street on Prospect there that came for sale, was dilapidated, and then Chad kind of had an awareness of you can never have enough parking, so we ended up purchasing that property, and it's getting had to get leveled and putting just a gravel lot in now, but to have auxiliary parking across the street to have that. So I think going back to that, Dale, we haven't had to purchase property for a long time.
And that saves an awful lot anymore.
Yeah.
Figure how much Waterloo is, $160-some million to build a school out there. And it's not going to be ready till, what, is it 2028?
Yeah,
that's the last number I heard. And so, but that's just a huge amount of money.
But it's it's unique here in Jesup. Like I said, you got 3-year-olds or 18-year-olds in that one building.
Yeah.
And I try to think where else is it like that? I'm not going to say the WV word because you don't want me to say it, Jim. But you've got elementaries in a couple different communities, and there are high schools out in the middle of the country. But there's not too many that have early childhood, elementary, middle school, junior high all in there. Which, is it all perfect? No, but what the most fun thing I think is you have all those ages that are interacting with each other. High school kids are going down to help in the elementary, and there's interactions in there.
That was some of the most enjoyable mornings. A high school student would come in with their kindergarten brother or sister, and you could just see in the eyes of that little kindergartner. They were the king of the world walking among those high school kids. It's like, this is great. I shouldn't be here, but I love it while I'm here. Obviously, we have some of the best facilities in Iowa. What do we have on the table for those facilities now?
And that's something I've always stressed. We'll talk about my other hat of working with CAPS, and I know we're sitting in the room that CAPS students will start coming here, I think, next week or whatever, after they've gotten going here in Jesup. But in my experience in profession is economic development and business. When I would talk to employers, and I ran the Buchanan County Economic Development Office for a few years and did that work in Waterloo, and I always hear employers say, I can find people, I can't find workers, and always came back to durable skills and interaction and that type of thing of where is that at. So when I got engaged with the CAPS program to support that in Waterloo or in Cedar Falls and see it spread, I was like, from an education standpoint, how do we look at doing this not just in a class like CAPS, but as a whole? And we've had discussions at the board table, and I've been a loud voice in it of, we've spent millions of dollars on facilities. I will never say they weren't needed. I think we had some pretty good timing on some facilities we built, maybe before we needed them, but then we were going to need them eventually, and planning that out. What are we doing in them? What is school for was a quote I gave you guys from Seth Godin, who's an author out there. What are we doing? And we drive by and see the new auditorium and the beautiful spaces, or go in there and see our gymnasiums and things like that. Are we bringing kids through Jesup? Are we developing them to not just be lifelong learners, but to be good citizens and leaders and things like that? So when the opportunity came up, as we're closing this out, Kramer, who's with Central Rivers AEA, he had approached, I guess it was him and somebody else who's no longer at Central Rivers, but Portrait of a Graduate is a program that you try and more or less, what are competencies you want your students to have when they graduate? And I had heard about it in my professional work, but I'm like, okay, this seems to be an avenue where we can pay a little more attention to how we're going to better develop students coming. And we had, this is probably, it was a year and a half, if not 2 years in the making, with community input and surveying, and not just from people within the high school building or the school building, but, came together, and there was these competencies that consistently came through, and, there were 6 of them that we put together. I guess think through these guys: problem solving, responsibility, communication, critical thinking, adaptability, and confidence. So the thinking is, if we can develop the students to have at least those minimum 6 traits, they're most likely going to be on a right path when they leave Jesup to whatever they're going to next.
How do we know, Nathan? How does the board know? How does the school know that the students have those traits?
That's a question, right? So that's in traditional education. You've got your metrics, you've got your standards that you feel like you have to hit from the state, or what we say from the school board, and a lot of those come into you maybe won't necessarily take a test on problem solving, or take a test on adaptability, or necessarily have a lesson in that. And we don't want to think, when you look at responsibility, that they're responsible because they get to school on time and they turn their homework in. Okay, are they responsible? That's the traits we're coming through. And this is the key thing we talk about, that this isn't going to happen overnight, that we're going to have the class of 2026 is going to be able to do all of these standards through there and meet those competencies. What has been impressive is the reason this will work is because we made sure it was a board goal. And it wasn't just, an idea of Cohagen or an idea of Mr. Ray or Miss Felt or Mr. Potabom, but we felt strong enough that this was going to be a piece that we want to create, development for that whole child coming through, that, we want to have engaged staff and students. We're going to be responsible stewards of resources, whether that's facilities and dollars and things like that. But we want this place to be a school of choice. We can cry about, the state taking our dollars and hand them over to privates or whatever, but people have a choice in education. And if they see what we're doing here in Jesup and what we're trying to work for with some of these standards, we want them to say, I'm going to send my kids to Jesup, or I want to work at Jesup, or I want to stay at Jesup.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, like I said, we can play the small violin about it, but it's just up to us to do better at it and how we show up. But that's what we're leaning on. I guess I'm leaning on my friends in academia that they've got to try and figure out how do they evaluate this, because Jim, as a former social studies teacher, you're going through a lesson, and whether they had to write a paper or they had to give a presentation or even planning to learn on a quiz or something like that, you think through when did they have to critically think of what they were understanding or what they were learning and problem solving they had to do, even to the extent of, and you both had this over the years where kids probably didn't ask for help, right? So how can you develop where a kid is comfortable enough and has then the confidence to then come to you guys and say, I don't understand what's going on, and be able to adapt in to try and learn that. So it's setting some of those standards on, okay, this is what the look-fors are. And I know there's been some documentation in there. And, I'm not in the classroom. I'm not in the PD sessions that are a part of this. I'm more of a advocate and trying to make sure we're moving forward on it is I guess, the legacy I want to try and leave from my board position, is that we're moving forward and teachers want to work here and students want to be in that building. And we can, when they leave that gym or the auditorium or whatever after graduation and throw their hat in the air when they're not supposed to, right? That we're like, they got it.
Yeah.
They're moving forward. They know where they're going next, and they've got those competencies to do it.
Do schools ever do surveys, like they go to graduates from 5 years ago or 10 years ago and just say, what did you do after for your further education, and how did it work out? And was there something that we didn't provide that you could have used, or did everything work out okay for you as far as, and not personal stuff, but just in their education and everything, just to kind of see how things are working?
Dale, I think it's been very informal from here. The challenge always is, somebody told me the other day they shouldn't call it high school graduation, because graduation means an ending. So how do you have, I know they don't call it 8th grade graduation anymore, they call it 8th grade promotion, because you're going to the next thing. But, it's like we get them through and, okay, on to the next group, right?
Yeah.
So we got to remember to, how can we get them to be able to offer up their cell phone or their personal email that we can reach out when we need to do that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's been more informal. I know in CAPS at a national and semi-regional level, we're doing a better job at what that is. It's a small town enough where you kind of get a sense of where some kids are at and what some things are happening and how they can evolve. I already see it. My son's, he's only been out of Jesup High School for just a few months, and I've already seen some people in his class that are kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah.
So
that
kind of gives me some interest of, okay, we need to do better at that. And an idea that I'm still working through that I think we can pull off is, when they read the name at graduation, that they say, Jim Gillespie, Jim Gillespie, and it says, going on to Upper Iowa, majoring in whatever, hopes to be a elementary teacher or a social studies teacher. It's not going to take any more time. There's already a pause in there when we have to take the picture anyway. But how impactful would that be to you sit in the gym going, oh, that's good. That's what Daniel's doing. That's what Mackenzie's doing.
And they do that as a Dollars for Scholars thing, which I always thought was interesting, what kids have planned on doing. He's going to study nuclear physics at Iowa. And you go, okay, I know that kid. That's not going to work. But it's nice to have big dreams, So,
but at least it's. I'm encouraging it because you have to come up with something.
Sure.
And even if you say you're taking a gap year or you're going to go work, it gives you some purpose into trying to figure out what that is.
Sure.
It is. We talk about this. And the success as a board member, the success as an educator. I go back and there's very few people that have walked out of our buildings that I've worried about. That I thought I don't know what they're going to do.
Sure.
You're right. I like that idea of crying their praises. That this person is going to. Now nobody's bound by that.
Yeah. Well, there's kids that are good athletically or whatever that end up with their picture on Facebook or in the paper. They're going to go play somewhere. But what about the graduate that is a presidential scholar at UNI that has their tuition now paid for and they work their tail off in school and made that. So we don't necessarily recognize that or understand. Everybody gets a chance to say what you're going to do that day, and I guess. Whether you follow through on it, I guess that's on you. But at least you have. I always say, at least you have a plan to go do something. As long as you're shooting for something.
Just out of interest, here's a question for both of you guys. Did you know what you wanted to do when you graduated? Did you have a plan in mind at that point?
I thought I did, Jim. I thought I was going to be broadcasting and I was going to own a radio station, and went along and realized the first radio job, I was like, oh, I would like to have be able to have some better meals, have a little more money in my pocket to do some things and pay for some things. It was it was fun work and got to do a lot of things. You're like, oh, okay, I didn't research this enough to see what kind of life you were going to have, and that's what we talk to students now. It's about not just about a job or a title or a pay, but what kind of life do you want to have and where do you want to be?
What about you, Dale? Did you
not have a clue. All I knew was I was not going to go to any school anymore. I was done with school, but I was 1A in the draft, so I knew I wasn't going anywhere. So I joined the Marine Corps for 4 years, and during those 4 years, I got my head straightened out. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I knew exactly that I wanted to go to UNI. And I wanted to be an elementary teacher. But it was somewhere in that 4 years that all came. Out of high school, I was dumb as a rock. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So,
and he spent 33 years in the school after that.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. My whole life, I hated school, didn't want to go to school anymore. And then I spent my whole life in school. And, what they say, man plans and God smiles. It just was perfect payback for me, I guess. I don't know, but I often think about that I did not like school and I spent my whole life in school.
It is. I knew from 8th grade what I wanted to do. Isn't that amazing?
Was that coach or teach or both?
Teach and coach. Okay. Yeah, there was a social studies teacher that was fresh out of college. Oakley Natvig was his name. We were a big class, 212 kids in my class, graduating Crestwood to Cresco, Howard Winnebago Community School District. And Oakley Natvig was right out of college, and he was the 8th grade social studies teacher and 8th grade boys basketball coach. And Oakley took us all in. He was good to us all. And even to this day, his daughter had brain surgery today, and I looked at the list of well-wishers, on the social media, and just incredible the amount of my classmates that follow Oakley.
That's true. That's good.
Yeah, that was the reason that why I did things, and I never changed it. I did change a little bit after I retired. I don't know if I could ever sign a contract again. You
just want to be at will of what you want to do.
I'm old enough now. It is.
You got that luxury now.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Where for years I signed that contract, I was bound.
Yep. Yeah. Well, there's you ask. When I talk to students, I always say there's a dream job you had.
Yeah.
And you might have been in 8th grade. I wanted to be an astronaut. I went to space camp in 8th grade. And there was a guy up on stage that said, if you want to follow on this pathway, math and science is going to be important to you. And I said, no, it's not. And I thought, I can't be an astronaut now because that's not necessarily important to me. And I kind of was like, well, I found this talking thing on radio that I followed through, and I thought that's what I was going to do. Again, job you think you're going to get into. And then I was like, okay, I need to make a little more money in different life, and end up selling office equipment and advertising. And then I was like, I got to do something that makes me happier. And that's when I got into college athletic administration. But I got burnt out, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks and nights and weekends. And I got out of that and found something I really enjoyed, which was, helping the workforce and young kids, connect them with business and industry. And I've talked to a lot of people, and I did a podcast for 2 years there that talked to people that had jobs you didn't know what they were. And that was consistent. There was all jobs that they thought they wanted to get into. Yeah. And then they end up in something else, and then they finally figured out what it was.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of talking,
and yours was delivering tuxedos.
Yeah, there you go. 2 or 3 days a week. But speaking of talking to people, you ran into a Cresco girl out in Carolina.
Yes. I was in California, yes.
I was in California, forgive me. Yeah. Was it Holly Olson, I believe?
It was. Yeah. And I don't know, I got on the subject. I said something about Jesup, and she said, I had a coach from Jesup. And I said, who was it? And he said, Jim Gillespie. And I went, let's take a selfie and send it to Jim.
Yeah.
And you knew who she was.
Yeah. Holly traveled the world with us. She went to Russia with us, played basketball in Russia. The first year we went to Moscow. And Holly was a competitive person. She's a UNI girl.
Yeah, she works for Junior Achievement at the national level now, I think is what her role was. Yeah, I was at an ed conference in San Diego, and we just, by chance, knew a common person and just started talking, and then find out she was from Iowa, and I got deeper that she was in the Jim Gillespie fan club.
Yeah. It's amazing how that happens. You meet people, no matter where you're at.
Yep.
Nathan, you've given us an hour of your time here, and we could speak another hour. Maybe we'll have you on another time.
That'll be another 3 years from now if timing's right.
Yeah, we're going to be here in 3 years. Our option's up, pretty soon.
Maybe him and Luke will be doing the podcast for us by then.
As long as it'd be heavily censored at that point.
But we've enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Is there anything we did ask you that you'd like us to ask?
I guess we touched on a little bit of the cap stuff, and people listening here in Jesup. This came about not because of me, but because of other people, but that knew that I was engaged in the one in Cedar Falls. But, it's housed right here and near your co-work studio 591, and get engaged with that group. If you're listening and they're always looking for projects and looking for people to support them, I'll speak for Allison Kitch on that. Reach out to Allison or stop in and talk to Kelly here at Co-work 591, and she can get connected. But it's it all ties into what we're trying to do up at the school is helping our kids move on to pathways with purpose that they feel they'll be glad they'll be sad yet glad when they leave Jesup, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me in.
We're back to Steve Brown Arts Center Podcast Network. I'm Jim Gillespie with co-host Dale Rueber and producer Blake. Dale, what do you have?
Something came up this afternoon on the day we're taping this, and a man named Charlie Kirk, who is I guess 31 years old, has 2 small kids, and he was shot and killed today during a rally he was holding in Utah Valley University, and I'm not sure what city that's in. And he's a big Trump fan. He's almost like one of the family. He and Don Jr., I guess, are very good friends, and has done a lot of work on behalf of President Trump and helped get him elected with the younger people, and he's a mega podcaster, not like us, but he's a mega podcaster. And the last I knew, he was shot by a single bullet, shot in the throat, bled out very quickly, and was dead. They arrested somebody, or they took somebody into custody that they were reporting an older person with white hair. But then later on, they said the fugitive was still at large, so this man must not have been who they were looking for. So the last I knew, they still hadn't arrested anyone. They were still looking. And that's getting to be 3 hours old now, so I haven't seen any news since then. But they had not arrested anyone. And it was a crowd. It was an outdoor crowd, and so it was hard to watch all the people and to monitor them as they came in because it's just outdoors.
Right.
And so they were going to have to quit it. But the thing that got me, that I wanted to in just a minute here. He's a conservative activist, but the man on the newscast that they were interviewing was talking about Northern Ireland, and he said in Northern Ireland it got to be that violence was the way they got things done. Both sides, the Irish and the English, were killing and bombing and this sort of thing. And they said in America, this is starting to be the trend. That if someone doesn't agree with you or someone is causing you problems or whatever, you kill them or you place a bomb or this sort of thing. As we learned in Northern Ireland, once this kind of behavior pattern is established, that's the only way to solve differences, then it's very, very hard to change that thinking around. And they were listing all of the political violence kinds of things that have happened just in the last 6 to 8 months or whatever, and there's been several.
What are some of those things?
Well, one was the shooting of the legislators in Minnesota, and then there was a bomb, although the 2 Israeli ambassadors were shot in Washington, D.C., and there was, I think, a bomb in California that killed some people. They had several like that, and I can't remember them all. I'm sorry. But they were saying, but they were saying, I had a list of 8 or 10 that he thought in the last 12 months, and most of them in the last 6 months. Fear was that this is the trend now, is that you use violence, get people that, I guess they're trying to change people's way of thinking or that people don't agree with them, and so this is how they take them out. And so he referenced Northern Ireland where these kind of thing went on, for many, many years. And so that's what got me, because I know you're a big lover of Ireland. And so that's the part that I wanted to talk about, just as that. If you've read anything about the horror in Northern Ireland and all those years and all those kids and people that got killed, we don't want to see that happen here. Yeah. And so there's got to be a better way to do this, but who knows what's going to happen. You'll know a lot more in the next day or two. And like always, the first news they had that they were reporting, a lot of it turned out not to be true. Right. Especially with the arrest of this other man, and they kept saying the guy was alive in the hospital, but people who were there said that he was hit in the throat they thought it was a high caliber bullet, and so that he was bleeding out so bad there's no way that he could have survived.
They say the shooter was about 100 to 200 yards away from.
Was that right? Okay. Yeah, because they were still guessing. They were talking to people, and some people thought he was shot from above, and some people thought he was shot from below, and you get all these conflicting things, and so. And see, 200 yards with a high-powered rifle is just a chip shot. That's not a problem at all. So anyway, we've got to do something different in this country, folks. And so
they say between 2016 and 2025, there were 25 attacks and threats targeting elected officials, political candidates, judges, government employees.
25.
Yeah, 25.
Yeah, and so it's I don't know what the answer is, but. What we're doing now is not the way we want to go.
What do you have for public library news?
Well, the library news, the exercise group is still going at 8 on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and the card games are on Tuesdays at 1. They're still doing those. If you need tech help, and I have used this before, it's 9 o'clock on Mondays. You can call and say, I can't get my phone to work or my computer or whatever. And so
you have used it?
Well, my wife has. I'm too proud to go down and say I don't know. But you would be surprised how little I know about. No, you probably wouldn't be. Okay, there's a brain health September 16th at 10 a.m., part of the Stay Independent for Adults 60-plus series from ISU Extension and Outreach. And they'll talk about brain health and show how you can acquire healthy habits that support a healthy brain. And so there are things you can do. On September 18th, there's a Spot, Stop, and Avoid Fraud meeting at 2 o'clock and talk with people about how to keep others from taking advantage of you and stealing your money. And it just seemed like every day you'll get a phone call or a text message or something where someone's trying to scam you out of your dollars. And it's shooting on bad. I keep thinking, though, we have all these insurance companies having these bright and clever little ads about how wonderful they are with their insurance coverage, and then the next commercial is from a legal firm telling you that you need a lawyer to make those damn insurance companies pay up what they're supposed to. And it's just very conflicting messages, and you don't really know which one. And you feel you have to have insurance for certain things, and all you can do is hope and pray that if you ever need them, they're going to be there. And the lawyers are telling you, well, we've got billions of dollars for people where the lawyer or the insurance company didn't want to pay or was trying to lowball them or whatever. So I don't know. I just think that's very interesting how that works. The Little Tot story time. Don't you wish we had some little tots around between we could take to the story time at 10:30 on Thursdays at the library. This month, the Friends of the Library meet at September 18th, Thursday at 6 o'clock. And even if you've never been to any of the meetings, if you're interested in the library and love the library, they'd love to have you come to the meeting. And so it's open to everybody. And the chapter chat book is September 15 at 1 o'clock. And it's called The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. So that's at the library. At Co-work this week, just one, Fat Roy's Mexican food truck will be back from 11 to 2 on Thursday the 18th.
Fat Roy.
Yeah. And then on the 21st, we're having our jam session. Is it still at the park?
It still is at the park.
Down on the big stage in the big building, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's a big building.
Okay. And then Gibby's food truck and the Bowls of Love food truck are going to be there. And on the 25th, if you're interested in the history of Jesup, I'm going to be leading it's called the Jesup History Walk, where we walk around part of town and talk about how Jesup came to be and just some of the history of Jesup. And so Kelly asked me to do that, and so I'm happy to. And she told my wife she's actually had people call and ask about it. So
good.
You know, you never know. Okay, so that's kind of what I had for today. Yeah, just real quick. And
I have this is Steve Brown Arts Center Podcast Network. I have a book that I'd like our readers to read. I am in the middle of I choose different topics every year to read. Like 1 year I read Che Guevara, books about Che Guevara and the Cuban Revolution. This year I'm reading
the FBI visit you or anything? When
they didn't.
They monitor your reading? Okay.
No. This year I'm reading Manifesto.
Okay.
And I just received a $25 book in the mail for like $5. It's wonderful. It's called The Misfit Manifesto. It's by Lydia Yugnakovich. She did a 2 million person TED Talk on YouTube called The Beauty of Being a Misfit. And she talked about how there are a lot of misfits. This lady has been dropped out of college twice, almost 3 times. She's a college professor with a PhD. She's been in rehab. She's been homeless, and she talked about the people living under the bridge there. And there's a lot of teachers living under the bridge. There's a lot of scientists living under the bridge. There's a lot of mothers and fathers living under the bridge. What bridge? Well, it depends on whether there's homeless colonies. It's called The Beauty of Being a Misfit by Lydia Yugnakovich. To those who feel like they don't belong, there's a beauty in being a misfit.
What makes a document a manifesto? Is there an easy way of explaining that?
How to live.
Okay.
How to survive. How people are that fit in there.
Okay.
How they have lived.
Yeah.
She talked about many of those misfits grew up in houses where they were abused, where they were around addicts and alcoholics.
Sure.
And they were not normal household. I don't know if anybody lives in a normal household.
No. Yeah. It's interesting because some of those people that are misfits and did not grow up in a normal household become quite celebrities. They have this special talent that they use to survive, or they're just wacky or whatever, like Robin Williams or whatever, and end up having very successful careers beyond anybody's wildest dreams. And a lot of them will say, well, it's because I grew up in this crazy house that I am the way I am, and that's what's made me my money. So,
but it's Lydia Yugnakovich, And the beauty of being a misfit.
Okay.
The book is The Misfits Manifesto. I'll give it to you when I'm done, Dale. It's a short read. So
All right. I'd like to.
I'll be done with it this year.
Even if it was a long read, I could read it. So.
No, I bet you could. I bet you could. As Dale said, we have a jam session on the 21st. On the 22nd at 9 o'clock, we have a artist collaboration at Gedney's in Independence. Don't forget to, if you're an artist, we'd love to have you in for a cup of coffee. Just talk art. It's a wonderful gathering. You know, we talk about family. We talk about issues dealing with the arts. We talk about our arts and talk about the Arts Center and how we can help you.
Sure. Okay.
Don't forget that we still have the 24-hour Mustang camera sponsored by Joe's Pizza in Independence. Thanks to Joe. As I said, I need the audience to help us find 12 artists for next. It's amazing how fast time goes.
Yeah, and it's all because I remember you talking about meeting 12 for this year.
Yeah.
And
we have John Casey there this month for the month of September. October is Deborah Christensen. Is Annika Wall, forgive me.
Okay.
Is October.
Okay.
November is Deborah Christensen. And December is Billy Joe Cook Ostreller.
That's great how you remembered that.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Thank you. And Em has been incredible to us. She loves the artist, and the artists love Em.
Yeah. The times I've been in it, she seems real thrilled with it. Yes,
she is. Remember the days that your gratitude outweigh your expectations are mighty good days. If you'd like to donate to the Steve Brown Arts Center, or if you have an idea for an event, go to the SteveBrownArtsCenter.org and follow the link. If you have news or would like to sponsor us, email us at jim@SteveBrownArtsCenter.org or call 319-290-0241 and leave a message. I'm Jim Gillespie with co-host Dale Rueber and producer Blake Tempus. Our thanks, as always, to Kelly C. Haas at Cowork 591 for hosting us and sponsoring us. Thanks to Nathan Clayberg for being with us today. Thanks to the audience for bringing these stray dogs into your life. And remember that each day is about little victories.